so much that it's going to contaminate it to the point where it just can't be usable. It's one of those situations where normally, if we could, we would require the developer to go back in there and fix it and address the needs. But you're looking at a roadway now on Floyd particularly, and Buena Vista for that matter, that's already widened as much as it needs to be. There aren't a whole lot of real improvements you could make out there. If it was really astronomical in terms of that impact, we'd have a different conversation this morning. But for the most part, we have to address the fact that we know what the existing conditions are, and we know what this potentially will do to that area. Again, it's not going to be detrimental, but at the same time, it's not going to improve it either. So it's one of those things we just have to look at and work through.
Well, how is both the developer, how is the planning department, engineering department, how are you all addressing the issue that was brought up by the traffic engineers of the inadequacy or the shared turning lanes being inadequate not only for today but in the future?
Well, again, that's something we're going to look at long range in terms of dealing it from a city standpoint of what improvements, if any, we can make out there right now to that intersection and to that roadway.
Well, I'm not sure that answers my question. This is according to the traffic engineers, this is a present day issue. Dealing with it in a long range plan just pushes the problem off into the future. I don't know if we want to do that. My point is, who's going to, with the developer, why is this not being addressed today?
Because, again, I'm not sure there's anything really the developer could do that would actually improve the conditions out there beyond what it is today. If it was, we would be offering that to them now and saying we have to address that.
I beg to differ with you. I think that they're making a request from this council, and we've got some traffic issues in the area. I'm assuming that they would, that this is something that's worth maybe looking at providing some solutions to this matter.
We're prepared to,
because you're certainly causing it, right?
We're prepared to address your concerns, sir.
Hi, good morning. Jason Dickerson. I'm also with Wolverton Associates, same address, 6745 Sugarloaf Parkway. After the conclusion of our study, we submitted to the Columbus, Georgia Traffic Engineering Department, which was approved by Mr. Doc Dorsey with very small comments. After we reviewed our analysis of the impact study, it was evident that there is an existing issue, which you guys have said here today. However, the proposed development, if it was built out, would not increase the problem in any substantial amount. You're talking a very, very minimal impact, which is why, as part of our study, we didn't recommend the improvements be made as part of the study, that it is an existing problem.
It's an existing problem, and it will be further.
Well, yes, certainly the development will not.
More traffic from the development.
Correct, and it's, it's going to add traffic to the roadway, but it's not substantial enough to where it would be evident to make improvements as part of the development itself.
Is that the position of our engineering department, traffic and engineering?
For traffic engineer Doc Dorsey to come in and address that.
So we reviewed the traffic impact study. As was stated earlier, there's already an existing level of service out there that is not very good, particularly I think when the morning rush hour, when there's a lot of people going through the intersection. We reviewed the existing conditions. We also reviewed the additional impacts from this development, and we did not feel that the additional impacts from this development were considerable enough to that intersection to make it any, I guess the best way to say it, any worse than it already was. There's already a capacity problem. There's already a very low level of service, but we did not see any way that the developer could do anything to make it better based on what was already there. Is that any other questions?
We do have another counselor in queue. I don't know if it's for you, but Counselor Davis is still up.
I guess right now the corner of Buena Vista and Floyd will not be owned by this partnership, right?
Circle K is that will retain ownership.
Circle K, sir? Well, it is a concern of mine. I don't think it would be put in our report as what is the reason, Mr. Jones, for the denial from our planning department?
The planning
Certainly
department,
it had to have some kind of impact in your decision.
the planning department did not deny this application, recommend denial. It came from the Planning Advisory Commission. At that time, my understanding is that when they met with the Planning Advisory
And
Commission.
let me just say, let me correct the Planning Advisory Commission. So the Planning Advisory Commission's recommendation. So what was the concern there?
My understanding about that meeting was there were the neighbors who were actually in the apartments came to that meeting. They did not understand or know what was going on about the rezoning at that time. No one had really bothered to make that issue to them. And the Planning Advisory Commission just felt they had the reason to deny it based on that fact alone. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that issue, but that's how they voted, and that's what they made recommendation to.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. And Counselor Thomas, did you have anything? Or you?
Yes. Is it typical for us to have someone associated with the project do the traffic study?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Typically, on any type of development of this type, we will require the developer or the owner or whatever to go out and perform an actual traffic analysis and submit it as part of the application. When we receive it, though, our staff is in charge with looking at it and making sure that they understand and agree with the findings. If they don't, we send it back to them, tell them to redo the work, or sit down with us and talk about it and see what else we need to deal with before it comes forward. But they are required to provide that kind of information, particularly on a development of this type.
Okay. And just so that I'm clear on what we're doing here, the corner of Floyd Road and Buena Vista Road, that is neighborhood commercial there, that's a gas station? Is that
Yes,
is
ma'am.
that right?
That's correct.
And what about across Floyd Road? What are some of those?
That's the Crystal that sits there. There used to be a GC with a tire store at one time, and I think they're automotive now in terms of that support.
And then as you go on down Floyd Road, like 1125, what is that? Do you know? Do you remember?
That's storage, just warehouse, mini warehouse.
Mini warehouse,
Right.
okay. And so as we're looking at the property that we're asking to rezone, can you pull that down a little so we can see? There you go. Across the street from the rezoning property is all general commercial, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. The majority of that is general commercial.
Except right there, the corner of Floyd and Buena Vista on both sides is neighborhood commercial. Everything else is general commercial, right?
Yes, ma'am. And
Okay.
those two pieces of neighborhood commercial really are non-conforming today under the ordinance because they exceed 5,000 square feet.
Okay. And so we're looking at the 1122 was the apartment complex, right?
Correct.
And then 1126, 30, and 40 were all single-family dwellings, is that right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, and so all of that will be coming down for this new grocery
Yes, ma'am.
store? Okay, I'm just trying to get all of it in my head. Thank you.
We have Counselor Huff.
Good morning. My concern also is just traffic. Your entry-exit points when you finish your development, because traffic is horrendous out there. Be it early morning, lunchtime, or 5 o'clock when you really find out.
Yes, as part of our study, again, we noticed an existing problem. After the study, with the additional trips added to the roadway networks in the adjacent area, you're adding approximately 8 seconds of delay in the AM peak hour, and then 8 seconds of delay in the PM peak hour. Now, that's 8 seconds out of an entire hour, so it's just not a substantial enough amount of time to recommend any improvements as part of the development.
Okay. I mean, I get the 8 seconds, but I mean, traffic's stacked up. I was just wondering how they're going to get in and out. I mean, you can't move now, so. Yeah. 8 seconds will, you know, with lights, traffic lights, and delayed lights to try to get through that intersection.
That's, well, yes, correct. And you can break it down further. The actual cycle length is 120 seconds out there at that particular intersection. So that's going to equate to about 3 seconds per cycle out of the hour. So it's just a very, very minimal impact.
So as far as your entry-exit points,
Yes.
how safe will it be to?
As part of our study, the entries and exits to site driveways were sufficient enough to handle the traffic.
Okay, so you'll be able to flow out of your
Yes,
development
yeah, there'd be
right back into the flow of traffic?
Correct. There would be deceleration lanes with, as part of the development.
That's
as
all
you-
an additional deceleration lane on our property. So-
As well as on Floyd as well.
Okay.
So we're taking those cars off the road and allowing them an additional deceleration lane to get into the development.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have Counselor Baker.
What were the proposed hours of operation there?
It's a 24-hour operation.
24? Okay. And a question for you, Mr. Jones. As far as the PAC, they raised an issue with compatibility of the comprehensive plan. Why was the disconnect between planning's review of the comprehensive plan and PAC? I mean, why?
I'm at a loss, Counselor. I'd have to go back and look at that again and see, but
I
there
mean, that
shouldn't
really
be
is the controlling document. So if there's a disconnect between PAC and planning, I'd just like to know what that is.
From my understanding here. Splits. Oh, okay, okay. That refreshes my memory here. Because you do have on the east half of this property, you can see the map here. It shows now that on the east half that's basically being residential and everything else on that being commercial. It's split right down the middle on that part. So that's why there is something, I guess, concern from that standpoint.
Okay.
The real issue here is what is the highest and best use for the property itself. You certainly could put some type of residential back in there, like multifamily. I don't know that single family would ever go back on that site because of the traffic and so forth. But again, the highest and best use we look at in terms of that is dealing with commercial use at that particular intersection.
Okay. I'm assuming that convenience store is grandfathered as NC because
It
gas sales
is.
and alcohol you couldn't have in it.
It
NC today.
is. It's been out there for forever and a day, so it's there for the time being.
All right, thank you.
All right. I think that concludes discussion. Mr. City Attorney?
All right. We've got an ordinance as amended. We'll bring it back in 2 weeks at the 5:30 meeting for a vote. We appreciate all
Okay,
y'all
we
being
have
here.
Counselor Allen with a question.
Just to clarify, Mr. Jones, on the plat, the property between the detention pond and Floyd Road, is that property, could that property be developed?
It won't be developed.
So it's,
There's no intention to develop it. It's going to stay undisturbed the way it is.
okay, all right. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
All right. Thank y'all for being here.
This piece right here.
The next item up, Mayor, there are letters around the table for 7711 Fortune Road. This petition has been withdrawn by the Waddells and through their attorney. We do need a short executive session for litigation, Mayor, and that's all we have listed.
All right, great. Thank you. And we will now move on to the public agenda. We have one item, Ms. Vanessa Harris. Is Ms. Harris here? All right, I don't see Ms. Harris. We'll go ahead and move on. And if she comes in the next few minutes, we can hear her at a break in the action. We will move then to the city manager's agenda. And if you would, please cue the city manager's agenda and turn off Councilor Allen's mic, please.
Madam Mayor and Council, first on my agenda is a PATH Foundation Master Agreement. You had the opportunity at the last business meeting to have the Community Foundation to come as a partner with PATH, and they did a presentation sharing how and what their relationship would be with the City of Columbus. And so we told you at that time, Deputy City Manager Hodge, I believe, that we would be coming back with a master agreement. And so on my agenda today, I'm asking you to approve.
Got a motion, is there a second? Okay, and then we have Counselor Thomas with discussion.
I'm a little concerned that nobody from PATH or here to answer any questions, but I want to make sure that the record shows, and Mr. City Manager, by our approving this master agreement, we are not spending one dime. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if I may, if there should become a need to spend money, it would have to come back before this body.
As I understand the agreement, PATH will come back to us with specific projects that may cost us money, correct?
That's correct.
What happens to this? I guess one of my questions is, how does PATH get paid if we don't approve these individual projects? The individual projects that I have seen that they are proposed are wonderful projects, and I think they are terrific. I think they'll be a terrific addition to our city. But we don't have the money to do this. So how do they get paid if we don't approve these individual projects?
Well, PATH is a 501c3 foundation, and they go out like 501c3s do, and they solicit funding from foundations, and one example is the Friends of Columbus, where they've already identified a project attempting to connect the Riverwalk and the Fall Line Trace, and the Friends of Columbus have put the money on the table for the planning for that connection, and that's something that we didn't go out and do. That came as a relationship with PATH. And so they, as a foundation, solicit funding, and we would allow them to solicit on behalf of projects that we're interested in Columbus. And so the foundation may go out and solicit funding that, and I'm just using that example, would say that we've got 60% or 80% of funding to do this project. Is the city willing to come up with 20% or 30% or 40%? And if that's first of all, the council would have to approve that project, but then we would have to determine if that's a project we're interested in, and if we have the funding to match funding that would come from that foundation. And
well,
so
that's part of my concern, Mr. City Manager, is that I don't think that the City of Columbus has the money to come up with 20, 30, or 40% of a project. And it's a very worthwhile project, but I just don't see us having that kind of money when we're looking at some of the other things that we have not been able to do. And
if we don't have the funding, then you would not approve the project, and there's nothing gained and nothing lost.
Okay, one other concern that I had in this master agreement, and it says that at some point it talks about one of the things that, here it is, it's section 4A. 7. Section 4, Article 4, Section A, paragraph 7. It says that they will use the best efforts to furnish concrete and other materials to all trail projects at a discounted price relative to what CCG obtains at public bid. does that mean that we will not be putting this out for bid?
That would,
These-
yes. That would mean that they've got maybe a larger supplier because they're statewide in other places, and they may be able to get a much better price for concrete than we could ever get.
And how does this square up with our procurement policy?
Well, with a master agreement and a partner, I think because they are out front of the project and they are using foundation monies and we may be matching, they would be able to they would not be required to go through the procurement to do this because we would obviously be getting it at a discounted rate.
I just want to make sure that we're not skewing that piece of our operation.
Yeah, and they do. It's a larger, because they are buying from one supplier for all of Georgia and all of the projects, they can obviously get concrete at a better price than we could get it for locally, and that's what they would be offering in a discounted rate. And I would just go on to say that this would be a 5-year agreement. There's a 30-day exit clause. They agree to do all of these things that are in this agreement, and in this agreement it's very clear as to what our obligation would be. And they indemnify Columbus, CCG. They provide all of the required insurance necessary to keep us covered. This has been reviewed by the city attorney's office as it relates to the city being covered. And as a partner, and as we've done with others, when we partner with them, and there are a number of projects, when we partner with them, we allow them to go out and use their procurement process to procure. And actually, when they're done, they turn the project over to the city, even though we have money invested. And so this is a 501c3. They are bringing something to the table, and then we have the choice or option to accept it or not. And if we don't, they walk away, and if we do, we've got something good for Columbus.
I guess the thing that I want to make very, very clear is that I'm going to vote for this memorandum of understanding, but I want it to be very clear that my vote today does not mean that I will vote for individual projects because of the cost of those individual projects. So I don't want anybody to misconstrue what we are doing here today. We are approving this memorandum at no cost to the city.
That's absolutely
and
correct.
I want everybody to be real clear with that. The cost does not enter unless and until council approves an individual project that we are going to contribute to. I think what they're doing, the plan that they have, I'm a little concerned about their plan to run a lane in front of Columbus High School. But other than that, I think it's wonderful. They're doing a terrific service for our city, and I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
And I understand that, and clearly under analysis, we say the execution of the master agreement does not commit the city to any funding requirement. Each project agreement will be executed and approved by council with funding identified for each project.
And I know that
so
that's
it does not commit us to any. It's a master agreement.
I know that that's in the MOU, and I am glad that you read it so that it is in the recorded.
Absolutely. Well, it's in the document also that we submitted to you. So.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
All right. We have Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have a timeline? Do we have anything written down that shows a timeline? I mean, I appreciate your clarification. I guess the part of the MOU that Councilor Thomas pointed out gives them permission to purchase or provide concrete for a project. In approving the project or approving the MOU, are we allowing them to pour concrete in any certain area? Or you're saying that anything they do, before anything they do, they will come back to council?
Each project agreement will be executed and approved by council with funding identified for each project. So everything that we do will come back to council for your approval.
Okay. Well, my concern, I'll just repeat, I guess, what I said when they were here for the discussion. Even though we approve each project, at some point along the way, council will be accepting that portion that has been developed of sidewalk or walkway as its property. And then, therefore, moving forward, we will be responsible for the maintenance of that section that's been developed. And the point that I was trying to make at that time and today is there's a cost associated with that maintenance. And going forward, I would hope we'd be able to identify the monies for that maintenance, because the last budget we just finished, we do not have any funds identified today to continue the maintenance of anything that is developed in the future.
Well, and I will say, Counselor, and I visited Carrollton, Georgia, to see some of their work, to witness some of their work, and it's awesome, it's excellent, and no doubt it would very much enhance the quality of life of citizens in Columbus. But most of the work that I saw was on city right-of-way, and so we are required to maintain city right-of-way right now, and most of that city right-of-way, we've got to mow it, and so there would be concrete there and likely less right-of-way to mow if you've got a 10-foot or 12-foot wide trail that's really beautiful. And so, and I saw this in a number of communities in Carrollton. And so, and so we've got to maintain right-of-way anyway, and then, and I would be hopeful that some of this could be maintained by private contract and I would hope through the support of the PATH Foundation.
Well, that's one thing we talked about at the meeting as well, was raising enough money to help fund the maintenance on an ongoing.
Yeah.
I would like to see the numbers as you described on what we're spending maintaining today and what it would cost once something is developed there to maintain
Yeah.
it. So,
Well, and of course, I don't have any numbers, but I can tell you we get calls on a regular basis. I got a call from a pastor in the historic district a few weeks ago saying, can you mow the right-of-way on from 5th to whatever? I was out of town, and we got people out to do it, but we only have the resources, and I hate telling people this, to do it approximately 3 times a year. And I get it even from my own house, on Steam Mill Road, between on my running route and where the kid was found last week that I found, it was overgrown. And so I tell my own household that we can get to it about 3 times a year, but we do it as best we can. So when you talk about budget, it's about that big to do that, but we do the best we can.
well, while we're talking on right away, I noticed in some of the plans there was a sidewalk and then a section of grass and then the curb and the roadway. If we could eliminate that little section of grass, that would save a lot of time and money.
You have to go out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's pretty. I know it's pretty, but
Yeah.
based on what
But I
you and
got
I are
you.
talking about today, it's
Yeah.
very costly to have that pretty laying there.
Yeah, and so I can't bring you numbers on the budget, but I guess my point was if it's a 10-foot, 12-foot pathway, then there's less grass to mow, and it might not be as bad. It was a point I was making.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. I made the point in the meeting that we had over in the community room. That little strip of grass that's pretty,
Yeah.
to me, is much better sitting on the other side, away
Yeah,
from
I
the
get you.
road.
I get you. But
Thank you.
at any rate, Madam Mayor, if there are no other questions,
We have one other, Counselor Davis.
I just want to say I appreciate the comments of my fellow counselors on this, and I think in respect to Counselor Allen's comments that he made, observations, at the appropriate time, if it ever takes place, these projects come before us to be approved, I'm sure that our staff can do a impact cost analysis
Sure.
to provide it along with the project so we can understand a little bit better. But as I understand, there's no really there's limited or no harm in agreeing to a master plan. It's just a master plan. It's I envision it as being modified or adjusted over time, and certainly these projects are, as you stated, Mr. City Manager, they're to be approved by this council. So at that time, we can make that determination if funds are available. But you got to have a plan's good. I mean, we need to have plans for our city, and from a standpoint of progressing. But the different issue here, or the greater issue, is sustainability. And I think that's what some of the concerns my fellow councilors have brought up. But you have to have a plan, in this case, is good for our community as we progress and move forward and build our city strong and provide that quality of life. The shortfall in not approving this, if I may, is that we're going to miss out on potential funding opportunities, whether it's from the private sector, whether it's from the foundations, whether it's from the business community, federal government money specified for these type of projects, DOT money specified for these type of projects. And we get those, we get grants like that all the time. But keep in mind, too, we have discretionary money that's earmarked for projects like this that you're going to be collecting for many years now, that can also be used to in addition to these other opportunities out there. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That you have the opportunity without the city and the citizens funding it. These opportunities are available, and they could come up. And being under this agreement and working with this group who specializes in securing funds for these kind of things, it's nothing but a positive for our community. So with no harm. And at the end of the day, we have to, it's a vision. It's just a vision. But this council certainly would have to, or future councils will have to make the decisions on the, from a funding standpoint. So I think the comments made were very adequate and reasonable from that standpoint. So, and I appreciate them.
I think you're absolutely right on point, because we've have philanthropists, greenway trails enthusiasts that they're just interested in doing this stuff wherever, all over the country, where there's a good project. And so, money that comes through that foundation may or may not be money that came from people locally, but they're spending it in Columbus because they are interested in seeing these greenways, pathways, these trails, and they just want to do something good.
Well, and I'd like to add to that. I know I took a trip over to Carrollton and saw what folks have done there.
Yeah, you did.
And I'm well aware of what's going on in Atlanta, but what was impressive was this, their plan was 20-plus years out.
Yeah.
And then they've already succeeded that, and they're right at, a 5 to 6 year mark right now, and almost they have their whole perimeter completed on the trail system that they've done. But most of the funding, what was impressive, the funding came from outside the state, came back in, that they just, that they leveraged. And here's another thing that's good about this. What I see is that you've got people in the community that have stepped up and put their money on the table and said, hey, we want to help you with this at no risk or or no liability at this point. It's just a vision. So I think that's good to have citizens to support it from that standpoint, the citizens willing to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that concludes the discussion. We have a motion and a second on the table, and if there's no further discussion, then we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Next, I've got a juvenile justice delinquency prevention and treatment program grant, and asking for your approval. The aim for this project is to provide increased accountability of juvenile defenders, providing evidence-based prevention models for at-risk youth.
We have a motion and a second for approval.
And there's no match required, of course.
Any discussion related to this item? Seeing that there's none, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
I've got some purchases. First, I've got upgrade the GIS tax parcel map database. It's an RFP. Asking you to approve this contract with Geographic Technologies Group, Inc. To upgrade the GIS tax parcel map database.
We've got a motion and second for approval of item A, GIS tax parcel map database. Councilor Thomas's discussion to that item?
No, I have a question on item F.
Okay, all right. We'll work our way down. All right, seeing no discussion on item A, all those in favor, please state aye. Any opposed? All right.
I've got annual software license maintenance for permitting system and business license system for inspections and codes, and then for our finance department revenue division.
That's
Asking your approval.
Item B?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve item B? We've got a motion and second to approve. Any further discussion on the annual software license? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Can we make a motion to C through E?
Okay. We've got a motion and a second to approve items C, D, and E, which consist of a transit enhancement equipment annual contract, playground mulch annual contract, and state-mandated annual workers' compensation fees. Any discussion related to any of these items, C, D, and E? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, and to item F.
F is high-performance mobile data computers for the police department in the amount of $233,087.50.
Got a motion and second to approve, and Councilor Thomas with discussion.
I just have a question. Mr. City Manager, I noticed down in the, in this item, it says these are for future purchases, and then I noticed down in the bids that we are out to bid for some pursuit vehicles. Are those two connected? Is that the it looks to me as if they would be, since
I would
the
think so,
numbers
but
seem to be
I
similar.
need to attempt to verify it with the Deputy City Manager of Finance, and she may not have the answer. They are connected.
Okay.
Yes.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the high-performance mobile data computers? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Any opposed?
Move approval of G through K.
All right. Is there a second? There's a second. We have a motion and second to approve item G, which is a declaration of surplus equipment at the Civic Center. H is the purchase of various supplies from the Georgia Correctional Industry. It's a Georgia state contract. I is the upgrade and interface of fire alarm control systems at the jail. J is the change order 1 for Valsenia Drive culvert replacement. And K is the membership dues for the Georgia Municipal Association. Is there any discussion related to any of the items G through K? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? All right. Mr. City Manager.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I'm going to continue with the presentation updates.
Did you want
And first,
Okay. Councilor Davis has a point of discussion.
City Manager, Madam Mayor, I'd like to just bring up a topic before we get into the presentations and updates. And it's just more or less a concern. I know last council meeting, we all approved a resolution that we would go in and do an audit on the hospital authority. And, you know, the more and more I think about that, I know that I don't know the depth. I know we talked about it being routine, but my concern is that, and certainly I'm all for the audit, but I think there's an appropriate way to handle it. I know that there's probably going to be some audit reports that maybe currently are in motion. Maybe they'll be coming up here soon. There's a possibility that, you know, our auditor could maybe, for lack of a better term, tag along with these groups and maybe look for an understanding. I don't know at this point exactly what we're looking for, to be honest with you. The reports I've seen from the external auditors they seem like they're pretty solid. They're, you know, very impressive. So I'm not so sure what we're looking for at this standpoint. Certainly I was concerned about going out and seeking additional services to come in, specialty services to come in and to help our auditing department. And I can't get out of my mind, the one thing I'm concerned about is that I just sense that there may be some friction in the relationship, and I'm hoping that there will be better communication as we move forward into the future and through this process. And I can't get it out of my mind that I don't understand why we can't, if whatever the concerns are, well, we can't just pick up the phone or sit down at the table and have an understanding and conversation with each other. So I just wanted to bring that up as a point of just a concern that I've had since the last council meeting. I think I shared some comments then. One of my other council, or a couple other council members shared some comments, but I've just been thinking about that because we have some relationships with those folks over there, and I just don't see why we can't keep those lines of communication open. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. And we will, most certainly. We actually communicate with them very often, and I think the relationship's very good. So appreciate those comments. And I know John Redmond will have an audit plan, and it will be limited in nature. So, and I think, Clifton, are you looking at that audit plan, as well as Pam, to make sure it's limited for our purposes only and not to get in anybody else's business? Clifton, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, we've already discussed it with Mr. Redmond. It's going to be very narrowly focused. We're just interested in making sure that all the financials are in order so that our pledge to cover their bonds is adequate, and that's not going to delve into any of their day-to-day detail management.
And again, in respect to this topic of discussion, only around the area of communication, could the city take a look at, as I just stated, working with the I don't know where they're at in their progress or the matter of them doing their external audits, but maybe we can look at working in conjunction with them.
Sure, we can
Find
look at
that information, and I'm just thinking about it just kind of keeps a more calmness.
We can take a look at that. It's just a timing thing, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Redmond,
it keeps a calmness to the
he
operation.
can work with their external auditor very easily, and we don't want him to reinvent the wheel, so it's going to be a narrow focus.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. All right, Councilor Baker.
One quick question related to that. When you say we have to cover their bonds, are those not revenue bonds? Are those general obligation bonds, or?
No. There are revenue bonds, but to the extent the project doesn't make money, then we have pledged up to 4 mills to cover any gap. You know, we give the Medical Center Hospital Authority, we make that pledge up to 3 mills,
Right.
And this was the remainder of what was allowed by state law. Of course, it won't take nearly that much money. They only had like $32 million worth of bonds on their project.
Right.
But that's what it is. They are revenue bonds.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next, Mr. City Manager, you had a presentation.
With that, Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and call up our HR Director to talk about the drop plan.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, City Manager, and Council. I wanted to just give you an update on the drop plan. That's the Deferred Retirement Option Plan that was adopted as a part of pension reform in July of 2012. First, I'm just going to provide a brief summary of the drop. This is going to be very high level, as the mayor would say, very high level on the drop, and because you all have been, our actuarial consultant has come and he's talked about the drop, the impact of the drop, and those sorts of things as it relates to our pension. But I'm just going to give an overview, talk a little bit about what some of the other cities are doing as it relates to their drop. And at the end of this very brief presentation, I will present options for your consideration as part of the drop as council members where you have the authority to intervene here. So I'll just go over this very brief presentation here. The drop, as I said, is the acronym for Deferred Retirement Option Plan, which was adopted in 2012 as a part of pension reform. It was a significant benefit that I'm personally pleased that the city was able to implement for our employees. The drop was designed to be a neutral benefit and designed to be cost neutral to the pension plan. That was the request of the Reform Committee, and the actuarial consultant complied with that, and such the drop is a benefit, but it's a cost neutral benefit. The drop allows eligible employees to retire without terminating their employment for up to 3 years. You can participate in the drop for up to 3 years prior to your actual retirement. Employees in the drop no longer make pension contributions. Therefore, their take-home pay is increased by 4%. As a drop participant, you get the opportunity to accumulate a lump sum of money for retirement. At the end of your drop period, that drop money that has accumulated may be rolled over to an individual retirement account or some other qualified plan, or of course you may take a lump sum payment. But again, at the end of your drop period, your termination of your employment is required. To be eligible to participate in the drop, and again, it is for long-term employees. So to be eligible to participate in the drop, you must meet certain age and years of service requirement. You can be age 58 with a minimum of 30 years of service, or age 55 with 35 years of service. There is no requirement to participate in the drop, although you may become eligible at these different time periods. There is no requirement for you to participate in the drop. It is a voluntary benefit. There are currently 37 employees who have chosen this option to participate in the drop. 12 of those employees are general government employees, and 25 of those employees are public safety employees. City Council approves pay increases, whether it's for active employees or for retirees or those employees in the drop. As you know, we have been allowed, and thanks to you, Council and Mayor and City Manager, that for the past several years, employees have experienced an annual pay increase. While the pay increase right now is nominal, going forward as the economy continues to get better, those increases hopefully will increase as well. So for the past few years, the cost of living adjustment that employees, regular active employees have received have been 0.5%. And if you're a retiree, you have awarded those a 0.25% pay increase. And you've done that since 2011. So talking about those drop participants, when you enter into the drop for retirement purposes, you are considered, for pension purposes, you're considered retired. Therefore, when you decide that the retirees will get a increase, a COLA, the folks that are participating in the drop will also receive that pay increase on their pension. This is just an example to show you a little bit about how, and this is a very simplified example of how a retiree might work someone that's eligible, an employee that's eligible to retire but decides to participate in the drop. For example purposes, the person might enter on January 1 of 2015. They make a salary of $60,000 annually. They are 58 years old and they have 30 years of service. This is an example. So they enter the drop and their pension is calculated. The retirement specialist in human resources will meet with that employee and they will calculate their retirement based on a number of things to include their years of service, their age, those sorts of things. But in this particular example that we're using here, the person's pension benefit, their monthly benefit is $3,000. So when you, on January 1, you've approved 0.5% for active employees and you've approved 0.25 for retirees. So that person who enters the drop, age 58 with 30 years of service, as an active employee, they get the 0.5% on their regular salary. I go home every day, I take my regular salary, so I get that 0.5%. And on my monthly benefit that is accruing in my pension account, I'm also going to get a half. That I don't want to add those two together. I just want you to see that's what's happening. As a regular employee, that's what a regular employee would get. That's not in the drop, because I don't want to confuse myself or confuse you. But as you give the 0.5% to an active employee. Okay, the person that's retired or in the drop will get the 0.5%. So at the end of the day, let's say over a 3-year period, the drop participant as well as the retiree their pension benefit would go from $3,000 a month to $3,023. That's their monthly benefit because you're giving them a raise every year. Okay, as an active employee, this is what it looks like. And I just gave another example here.
I'm sorry, Ruth, if you would go back, we may need Pam to pull out her trusty calculator. I believe there may be a math error.
Okay.
It looks like if you're calculating the monthly benefit, then you would need to do $7.50 times 12 to get the total annual for that first year, and then you would need to do $15 by 12 to get the total benefit for that year, and then $23 by 12, and then whatever those three things are, add them up, and that would be the 3-year impact of a 0.5%.
That's correct.
Right,
and that
so,
total
okay.
impact, Mayor, would be $270.
Okay.
And on that 0.25, it's about $90 a year. It's
Okay.
about $90.
Is that about right, Pam? Just so council knows, because at the end, there's a question that we may need you to either adjust our current budget ordinance or to adjust the drop plan. So the math may be important to you in your consideration. So as council's weighing and deliberating these proposals, what would be the comparative of the 0.25 impact over 3 years for council so they can get a sense of what that is? You said 200 and something?
$270.
$270.
That .25 added, every time you give an increase, annually, that's about $90 on this particular monthly benefit of $3,000. It's about $90 a year, and over a 3-year period, it's about $270.
Okay.
And the next example, it just assumes that the economy is getting better and that you will be in a position to provide more of an increase. For example, if you are able to provide up to 3% increase. Typically, what you've done in the past, if you, on regular employees, if you give us 3% increase, you've also given the retirees a pay increase as well. And let's say we split the difference and it's 1.5%. And that's what this example shows. So, as a regular employee that's making that $60,000 a year over a 3-year period, they will have increased their pay up to $65,564. So on the active side, they've got about a $5,500 increase. As a retiree or a drop participant, if their pay is increased by 1.5% over a period of time, their monthly benefit goes from $3,000 a month to $3,137. That equates to about $500 a month on the retiree. 1.5 is about $500 a month, or just over $500, or about $1,600 over that 3-year period, if you're giving them the 1.5%.
Councilor Baker has a question.
Quick question. This is probably a little bit elementary, but just to make sure I'm clear. On the participants that are in the drop plan,
Yes.
once you enter, are you drawing just the retirement benefit and all of the salary is deferred, or is there a split or a fixed amount?
Once you enter the drop, again, your retirement is calculated.
Right.
It's calculated. Just as in this example, if you were making $60,000, your benefit would be $3,000.
Right.
So it's an account for you, that $3,000. It's tax deferred. Their council also voted such that your drop account will draw interest as well. So it's sitting there. You can't touch it. You can't do anything with it until you terminate your employment. And you can only stay in the drop for up to 36 months. So you have to leave at the end of that period.
So you're drawing the salary, just the benefit goes into the...
Your pension benefit goes into the drop, yes.
Okay.
And I'm still an active employee, so I'm getting my regular salary because I'm working every day.
But you're not required to make the 4%.
That's correct. The 4% that you were paying as part of your pension, you don't pay that, but you receive it in your salary. You receive it back in your salary.
I follow there, but so the amount that goes into the drop account is just the actual actuarially determined
pension. That's correct. That's your pension that goes into the drop account. That if you had retired, you'd be getting it. If you'd retired, you'd left the city, you'd be getting it. But instead, it's been calculated, and now it's going into an account on your behalf.
So it's not the original, so that the $3,000 benefit that you were getting, that shifted over into a drop account.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely, yes.
And it just accumulates until you retire, and then you can either defer it or draw it.
That's correct.
Okay.
We surveyed a lot of cities, states, and counties to see how they treat drop participants, and they all are different. If we surveyed 5 counties, states, and cities, if we surveyed 10, if we surveyed 15 or 20, they vary in terms of how they treat drop participants and as it relates to pay increases. We found that some cities, if you enter the drop for however long a period that they had it set, while you're still receiving your pay as an active employee, you could receive pay increases. Some had it where you could no longer receive pay increases. Some had it where if you're in the drop, you see no pay increases on your drop. Some had it where you could receive pay increases on your drop. Some had it where you could not receive pay increases on your drop, But if you're a retiree, you might be eligible to receive pay increases. So it varies, and it's a mixed bag in terms of how they receive it, how people.
Retha, let me stop you here because it may be important to council's discussion here in a minute, because the big difference is this word pay increases. It's the distinction, if you're in the drop plan as it's currently configured, if you receive a promotion, so you were a captain in the police department, now they've made you a major, and that comes with a pay increase, then you get that, obviously, in your act, even though you're in the drop plan. If we decide that we're going to give a raise, and there's a big distinction between a raise and a COLA, as you all well know, because we have employees tell us all the time that we haven't given them raises since 2008, but we've been giving them COLAs all this time, but they're insistent that we have not given them raises. So those things are different. If you receive a raise, that would go into your salary. But the distinction is now this debate about COLAs, whether because we give retirees COLAs and they're getting the benefit of the COLA for their retirement benefit impact, if we should also give it the COLA to them